The Biden administration has been negotiating prescription drug prices in Medicare, something the previous presidents, including Obama, have promised to do, but President Biden did deliver on. Today, the White House revealed the names of the first 10 drugs subject to these negotiations to bring the prices down. We're going to put their names on the screen. 2 of them are primarily blood thinners. One's for blood cancer, 4 are for diabetes, 2 are for autoimmune disorders, 1 is for heart failure. And some of these drugs can treat more than one thing. How soon will Medicare recipients feel the impact of these negotiations, and how much do you think they should expect to save?
Okay, so a couple of things. This is so important. This critical provision that's coming out of the Inflation
We're talking
Reduction
about it right
Act.
now. That's what
And I appreciate.
I
Thank
agree.
you for giving us this opportunity, because we're talking about 9 million Medicare beneficiaries who are going to really feel the relief of these 10 drugs as far as costs. We're talking about $160 billion of savings that taxpayers are going to have when we look at what the health care benefits are coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act. This is huge. You look at these 10 drugs. In 2022, they cost Americans who take these 10 drugs $3.2 billion. That's $6,000 out of pocket for just one drug.
Right.
And so this is a tremendous, tremendous thing. As you just said, 33 years. It took 33 years to make this happen. And what the president has been able to do is beat Big Pharma, because now Medicare is allowed to negotiate. It's going to take some time. We're going to, Americans are going to see the effect of this in 2026 as it relates to these 10 drugs. But the Inflation Reduction Act has already been working. About 15 million Americans are seeing $800 per year in savings in healthcare. You think about the insulin, $35 for senior citizens when it's capped at $35 for senior citizens, and that is incredibly important as well. So we're seeing the effects of Inflation Reduction Act that only Democrats voted for a year ago.
So you said the president beat Big Pharma, but Big Pharma said, well, I mean, if it were up to them, they'll say not so fast, because several companies and industry groups have filed, as you know, multiple lawsuits claiming that these negotiations are unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Some of the bigger names include Pharma, that's the trade organization, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, the Chamber of Commerce. Is the White House concerned at all about this pushback?
We're not concerned. Look, you talked about the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution, Jake, that says that Medicare cannot negotiate with pharmaceutical companies.
There's nothing in the Constitution about Medicare.
Well, here's the thing. Look, we believe that we have strong standing ground legally, and we believe that we're going to fight this, and we're going to win this. We're going to leave that to the Department of Justice to do to move this process along. I do want to say one quick thing. Today, there was this gentleman named Stephen who introduced the president. He's a senior citizen Medicare beneficiary. He has a rare blood cancer, and he also has type 2 diabetes. He pays $16,000 a month. $16,000 a month for his medication. Nobody should have to live this way. He does not want to retire because he doesn't know how he would be able to afford this.
Right.
One of the medications that we announced today of the 10 is on that list, and it's going to save him some money. This is what we're talking about, and this is what the president has been very steadfast about, lowering costs, especially healthcare costs for Americans.
A new Associated Press poll finds that most Americans believe that President Biden is too old to be president. The poll looked at 80-year-old President Biden versus 77-year-old Donald Trump. 77% of adults say Biden is too old to be president. 51% of adults say Trump is too old. And if you look at the breakdown by party, Republicans generally don't think of Trump's age as an issue, but both Democrats and Republicans agree Biden is too old. So here's the question. Is the White House worried that questions about President Biden's stamina could ultimately impact whether or not voters will be able to support him for a second term?
So I'm going to be careful about 2024. I can't speak to that directly, but
you can talk about the perception of the public with the president's stamina and his age.
I'm happy to talk about that. I get asked that question a lot. Here's the thing. What this president brings to this administration is wisdom and experience. And that is just true as senator, as vice president, and now as president. And we just talked about, and I appreciate the conversation that we had on Medicare, the first 10 tranche of prescription drugs that we just introduced because of the Inflation Reduction Act. And that is the thing that the president is able to do, is deliver. Really move forward historic pieces of legislation, change the lives of Americans for generations to come. And that is what we focus on, the president's record and what he's been able to do. Look, People have come after the president about his age. They did it in 2019, they did it in 2020 leading into the general election, and they did it in 2022. And guess what? He beats them every time because he has his finger on the pulse on what it is that the American people need. He talks about issues that really matter to the American people, and he is delivering. Is there more work to be done? There's always more work to be done. But we are happy to take that on. Certainly not going to talk about 2024, but what I can speak to is what the president has been able to deliver day after day for the American people.
Okay, so you're part of the 23% of adults who are not concerned about the president's ability to be president because of his age and stamina. I got it.
That's because all you got to do is watch
but
him.
77%, but 77% of adults are worried. That includes Democrats who presumably will vote for him. What did you make of it the other day when former Ambassador and Governor Nikki Haley said that President Biden is, I'm paraphrasing here, but something along the lines of, degrading before our eyes, and that ultimately Vice President Kamala Harris will be president in a second term?
Look, again, I'm not going to respond directly to Nikki Haley. Not going to do that. Can't do that. Hatch Act. Got to be really mindful and careful here. What I can speak to is look at his record. Look what he has been able to do. We literally just talked about these 10 drugs and Medicare being able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies, which is something that no other politician has been able to do. 33 years that they've been trying to do it. This president made it happen. This is a president again. And you asked me about Ukraine, right? You asked me about the supplemental funding. He has done something internationally, right, around the world, which is bring our allies and our partners together, especially what we saw after the last administration. This is a president that knows how to get the work done, who is focused on the American people. That's what I will speak to. I'll speak to his record, and his record stands alone, and it is something that Americans should be proud of, something that we all are proud of, on all of the historic amount of pieces of legislation.
Right, but I'm talking about his age and his stamina and his ability to do the job, and you're talking about the record. And I understand why you'd rather talk about the record, but I'm talking about what Americans see when they turn on the TV and they see, Joe Biden's been in politics since before you were born, and like that he's
let's talk,
aged.
Let's talk about this.
As we all do.
Let's talk about this, and you all talked about this back when we were marking the 1 year anniversary, right, of the war in Ukraine, the unprovoked war by Russia. What did the president do? He went to Kyiv. And he was there with the alarms blaring in the back. And people were so impressed that he was able to be there and look strong and represent the American people in Kyiv in a war zone country. And that's what you saw.
I'm not saying he's not able to walk.
But you're talking about his strength, right? You're talking about how he's looking right now.
He's 80. I think like the average American male only lives to be 77 or something.
But here's the thing, Jake. People saw him and were impressed that he was able to do that he was able to be there and present the American people. Look, the president says this all the time. Watch him, right? Watch him. And
they are watching him. That's what I'm saying. That's the 77% who are concerned.
No. But I've had conversations with some of your colleagues in the White House press corps when we travel abroad, how it is hard for us to keep up with this president who is constantly working every day to get things done and making sure that we are delivering for the American people. And I think that's what matters. I get it. I get what you're asking me, but the record matters too, Jake. What he's been able to do, no other president has been able to do if you look at his legislative record. And that matters.
You mentioned Ukraine, so let me bring in another topic having to do with Russia. Because Russia released rare video of detained American former Marine Paul Whelan in their custody. And you can see Whelan wearing a Russian prison uniform in different parts of the prison. The video includes shots of him using a sewing machine, eating in a cafeteria. The video also shows him responding to a reporter asking him questions. Let's roll that.
So you understand when I say that I can't do an interview, which means I can't answer any questions.
So he's been in that Russian prison since 2018, accused of espionage falsely, the U.S. government says. Is the U.S. any closer to securing his release and bringing him home, or Evan Gershkovich?
So here's what I can say. We are working very hard to bring them home to their families, Paul and Evan. I wish I had some groundbreaking announcement to make to you today. I do not. What I can say is that U.S. officials have been in touch with Paul for the past several months. And I will repeat what his brother said today, is how, looking at that footage, he looks unbowed. and he has been courageous, Paul has been, and he has been incredibly impressive over these past several months especially, and it will never deter us from saying what we say at all times, right, when it relates to Paul Whelan, which is it is unacceptable what Russia has done, and we will continue to say that he needs to be released immediately.
All right, Karine Jean-Pierre, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.